Hi, welcome to a special edition of Spinnaker News. I'm Shafalika Bhatnagar, your host. Today we are joined by Veronica Wilson with Outjacks Radio and Terrence C. Warwood from The Closet Jacks. We'll be discussing the local Jacksonville HRO ordinance that has been recently updated, as well as the Supreme Court ruling for LGBT rights. Welcome, you guys. Thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. I'm excited to be here too, actually.
I'm glad. Let's jump right in. So in 2017, the Jacksonville Human Rights Ordinance was updated to include gender identity and sexual orientation in anti-discrimination laws. Let's talk a little bit about that day, if you remember it. I believe it was Valentine's, and there was a huge party down in Hemming Park to celebrate the passing of the ordinance. So Veronica, would you like to start?
Sure. For me personally, that was, I hate to say it, but it was kind of like finally when that happened. We had been fighting for the HRO, and I consider myself a Jacksonville native. I've been here almost my entire life. And it was so disappointing in 2012, if I remember right, that we were not able to pass it because it was for everybody that was really, I would say, educated about what the HRO was trying to do. It was kind of a non-issue, but then we had so much resistance to it. And it was just, we went into it in 2012, it was really, really fresh. Not a lot of people knew about it, not a lot of people were comfortable with it. And then obviously it failed then. We built a coalition. So really, I have to send a lot of props to the Jacksonville Coalition of Quality, JCE, who created that, who built all of the supports, both in businesses and in among the clergy, and among all of the various politic people to be able to make that happen. And that was, I remember when that one was down, and it was just a huge relief for me.
I see. I can imagine. I believe, according to the last census, the LGBT community here in Jacksonville is about 50,000 people strong. And so it does affect a lot of people. It primarily protected people with employment, healthcare, and housing. And Taryn, can you talk a little bit about why those protections are necessary for the LGBT community?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's necessary because it's, it's what's right. It's human rights, and I think that people get so caught up in, well, I don't believe, or I don't I don't agree with homosexuality. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you don't agree with it. The whole point of it is, do you believe that we all should have equal rights? And that should be a resounding yes, but a lot of times it's not. So it's extremely important because that's all people, everybody just wants to be able to live and live freely, being who they are.
I agree. What are some of the local resources available to assist the LGBT youth in the area and also to safeguard the community?
So of course you have, there's Jasmine and there's other organizations, PFLAG, and I'm sure there's a lot that I'm not mentioning, but there's a lot of resources. The Closet, right? Exactly. The Closet Jacks. There's a lot of resources, that are available for people, and I just wish that I wish that we could be able to just be free, and just live as human beings, period, regardless of color, regardless of sexuality. That's it.
I see.
But
well,
if I can interrupt you, it's interesting that you bring that up though, because we have quite a bit of resources, especially when you're talking about LGBTQ youth. Where our resources lack in this town right now, I would really say, is when you reach adult age, or people that are beyond, I would say, the age requirements of our youth organizations in town. We still, while I'd say we really do well for youth, youth, homeless youth, LGBT youth, I still feel like we have some challenges to go in the area of like, where do you go when you're an adult? That's one of the reasons I brought up the closets, because that's one of the, especially if you're a person of color and you're trying to come to terms, like, where is that safe space? And the closet is one of those safe spaces. But that's, again, like, I would challenge anybody watching this to really think about, yes, we have youth covered, but do we really have like the support that we totally need? And I think that's where we fall a little short.
I see. I see. Well, recently in the last month of June, during Pride Month, the HRO ordinance was updated in that when it was originally written into law in 2017, the ability to enforce these laws wasn't written specifically and detailed out. They had to come back this year and do that, otherwise the ordinance was effectively null and void. So that was successfully fixed and passed once again. And pretty soon, right after that, the Supreme Court of the United States also passed a phenomenal precedent on the federal level, stating that gender identity and sexual orientation are included in the anti-discrimination laws of the Civil Rights Act from 1964 under the specific word of sex. And it was interesting, the vote was 6-3, and it focused on protecting the employment of LGBT people across America. And Justice Neil Gorsuch was the majority writer for the vote. And it's interesting that he's a conservative justice, typically, and he was also appointed by President Trump. But he is also, from a legal standpoint, a textualist in that he looked at the text of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and said that, yes, the word sex does include gender identity and sexual orientation. So what are your thoughts on that, Veronica?
Well, it's interesting that, it's interesting that they go ahead and they reaffirm it, for one. And interesting to me, I guess interesting is not the right word, because if you go back and you look at the way that they started to enforce it, long before you had LGBT marriage, you actually had a lot of the courts holding up that Title VII, I believe is Title VII does uphold trans individuals' rights. And that was slowly going. So there was an undercurrent that wasn't very visible, but it was highly visible if you were trans and paying attention. That was happening, and for them, I would have, had they have gone completely role reversal to that, that would have been incredibly. It would have been incredibly damaging, for one, obviously, but then it would have flown in the face of a lot of like earlier court precedents. Now, one of the things I like and I was super happy with is that, despite all of the politics in this world, right, despite the Trumps and despite everything else, you still have a group of people in the Supreme Court doing what people in the Supreme Court should be doing. And we've been getting caught so much into that political media circus, quite honestly, that having them come out and saying something that clearly made sense, clearly has precedence, and honestly, the country is clearly going in that direction, and they recognize that and they support it. That kind of gave me a little bit more confidence back into the Supreme Court, the branch of our government.
I'm happy to hear that. Taryn, do you have any thoughts about the Supreme Court ruling?
Yeah, I mean, it's to Veronica's point, it definitely shows the progress that we are making as a country. But one of the things that I was saying earlier on the Outjacks radio panel was it's the purpose of the Supreme Court justices. They're supposed to be non-biased. They're supposed to be nonpartisan. And a lot of times historically, we've seen that they have not everyone has been, and it makes it for people like Roberts to come back and back certain things. It does show some progress, but it also still, to me, it just still shows that we have a lot of work to do. To me, I just feel like it's ridiculous that we're still fighting for some things in 2020. You know, just for people to be treated fairly. To me, that's just wild. That's absolutely bonkers. You know. So.
I understand that. Well, another part of this interesting Supreme Court case is that there was another historical element to this. One of the people who brought the case to the Supreme Court was named Amy Stevens. And she was working at a funeral home, and she told her boss at the time that she was going to transition to become a woman, and then she was fired. And that's part of why this case began. There were two other sides to this as well, but for her case, Amy Stevens has been fighting ever since that as a trans woman to have protections for employment. And unfortunately, about a month and a half ago, she passed away before this ruling could come down. And my question to both of you, and it's an open question, is how will Amy Stevens be remembered by the LGBT community?
I think she you know, will definitely be remembered along with a lot of the other trans activists who have passed, as someone who fought, you know, who fought up until the very end, who fought, and you know, to stand for what's right. It's not about what you believe, you know, is in your opinion what you think about homosexuality or what you think about trans people. It's not about that. And I think that one of the things that I hope she's remembered for is her fight, you know, the fight that she had to not give up and to be willing to stand up and die for what you believe in.
Veronica?
So part of me wants, you know, every individual, especially the ones who struggled. Obviously, she went through such a thing. She went through such a time. She became a national, basically a national cause for all of us. I don't know that her name specifically is going to get remembered for this one. Not yet. That's kind of a negative view. I think that we've got a lot of stuff going on right now, and that this is one of many major strides that we've had in 2020. I almost, if I could just pull myself out and be completely non-biased about it, I would say that she's not going to get full credit for this until a few years down the road, when we really start to look at the historical reasons that got us to where we are. I think eventually her name is going to come back into it, and eventually, it's going to be known to say, okay, this person took this case to the Supreme Court and won. But I also kind of worry that she's going to get lost. I do kind of worry that name is going to get lost in everything else that's gone on in 2020. But overall, yes, she will be remembered, and she will be remembered a long time when scholars look back on this one.
I see.
And I'd like to, can I add to that? I just wanted to say, I think that I agree with Veronica completely, but because of a lot of stuff that's happening, there may be some, she might get lost in it, but I think it's up to us, you know what I mean, to continue to bring her up in conversation. It's going to be up to the historians. It's going to be up to the advocates who, a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, to ensure that they bring her up, but I do believe, and I do agree with Veronica when she says that eventually her name will come about. If you think about, like, in other movements, like if you think about Nina Simone with the civil rights movement, Nina Simone, for all intents and purposes, she probably belonged era. But during the
what was that she belonged?
Oh, Nina Simone. And this, I'm just talking specifically about like the civil rights movement. So back in those days, a lot of Nina's fight got lost in the shuffle. because of everything that was going on. But now, if you think about it now, in the past few years, her name has come up a lot, you know, and people have gone back and reflected on her, and they've referred to her a lot in terms of the civil rights movement, in terms of being an artivist, you know, someone who is taking their art and standing on, you know, being an advocate for rights for people. So I think Amy Stevens will be just like that. You know, like I said, it's up to us though to bring that up and make sure that her name does not get lost in the shuffle.
I see.
True. And Sylvia Rivera. So let me make sure. Yeah, Sylvia Rivera and Martha B. Johnson did not get love at first. They were really lost. And I mean, both of them lived, I believe, in abject poverty all the way until they finally passed away.
And
Martha B. Johnson
riots,
was
right?
killed and thrown in the river. And still, like, that didn't get a lot of credit until later on, when now we're starting to go back and now we're starting to listen and look and see, you know, who are the people that really set the milestones or set the walk stones on the path that we're on. And I think this is going to be one of those cases too.
Well, you know, Amy Stevens was the first trans woman to ever take a case to the Supreme Court. And so historically, she has set that precedent. She is the first. And so her name will go down in history for that as well. So let's talk a little bit about the LGBT community and trans issues. What are some things that you're hopeful for, seeing that Jacksonville and the federal government are kind of coming to the same agreement with gender identity? What are some things you hope for the trans community?
Better trans healthcare. That's kind of where it's at. You know, it's trans healthcare, and I think better awareness and conversation in general. You know, we were earlier in our podcast earlier with Taryn, we were talking about, you know, well, what is really being done for trans women of color, and obviously we have huge strides to go in that particulars. And I didn't get to say it on that, and I'll probably bring it up when we bring this topic up, but I'm like, you know, just common conversation, just like the encouragement of conversation between employee and employer. Like, hey, you know, what have you ever thought about what you would do if, you know, a trans person of color came and asked you for a job? You know, how would you react? Just kind of like having those conversations beforehand, especially if you consider yourself an advocate. Definitely healthcare is going to be one of them. Employment, we still have a long way to go. And just general, like, I don't know, just general understanding of what it is like to be trans and how to support that person. Yeah, we talk a lot about it, but what does that really mean? I think that we're still finding out, especially as the youth come up, and the youth have really taken this conversation over. To be honest, thank God, the youth have really taken this conversation over, and they've run with it. So just kind of listening to our youth now and seeing what they say and finding useful ways from our perspectives to be able to handle and support their broader conversations.
Wow, I think that I appreciate you saying that. That was very well said. We're coming up on the end of our interview, and I would just like to speak to something I've noticed. In the month of June, it was not only Pride Month, but we also saw a huge uprising of Black Lives Matter movements. And so we had protests in the streets and marches for Pride. And I've begun personally as a journalist to see that the two groups were coming together to support one another. Taryn, would you like to speak on if you've observed that and what your thoughts are?
I think it's great, you know, and I think that, you know, awareness, just going back to Veronica's point, more awareness of all of it is necessary, and it's definitely needed. These are conversations, and these are things that we have been fighting for a long time individually. And so to see groups coming together, rallying together. I mean, like I saw a video of skateboarders, you know, skateboarding for Black Lives Matter, and it was just, I love it. You know what I mean? And I just wish that those people who feel like, oh, all lives matter, I wish that they would just really listen, and see what the motive is behind it. The motive is not to try to elevate Black lives above any other life. It's a matter of just trying to elevate Black lives to equal playing ground, to an equal playing field, because it hasn't been. Black lives have never mattered historically. In our country's history, Black lives have not mattered. In the we were written as 3/5 of a person, so it's Black Lives Matter is not about elevating Black lives to a higher standard or above anyone else. It's just a matter of trying to get Black lives to an equal playing field as everyone else, so I love it. I want to see more of it. And I wish that, people would just listen instead of holding on to all of these values that they feel like they have and that they should have. Just listen. No one's asking for anyone to be treated better. No one's asking for that. All people are saying is, can we all just be treated equally? That's it.
I see. I think it's an interesting development to see these two movements come together. There is, of course, a long-standing issue with people of color in the trans community and the LGBT community. But it is interesting to see that people are supportive of one another's movements. Where do we go from here, you guys? Do you have any last thoughts or last comments that you'd like to make?
Karen, I'll let you go.
To be honest, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but I'm hopeful. As much as I am afraid of everything that's going on, I'm also hopeful, and hoping that we continue to progress and we continue to just listen to each other. My prayer is that we just listen more to each other. And I'm hoping that I feel good. I feel good that that's going to happen.
Thank you. And Veronica?
I think it's time. It's honestly, it's been beyond time. It's not really comparable to anything in particular, but this is something that we have just been struggling to make a decision, to make a move, to make this happen, to make this movement happen. We've been struggling to do this for so long, and it's caused so much damn pain along the way. It causes so much pain every day. People drive themselves insane looking at Facebook. People drive themselves insane looking at social media in general. I think the future of this is that we're going to continue to move forward, because honestly, nobody is really going to want to move back at this point. We continue to move forward. We continue to have these conversations, and we just say, all right, this is it. Let's get over this. Let's move past this. And, maybe one day we'll all be invaded by aliens, and we'll learn that, we've got to stick together. That's stupid, but, that's kind of like, okay, what is it going to take? But I definitely do have a positive outlook for the future as we move on, as I move on. I'm looking forward to good things. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I definitely think we're going to get there.
Maybe the aliens will come save us from ourselves.
The aliens will rescue us from ourselves. Maybe. On that note, I'd like to thank you, Taryn, for joining us. Taryn is the founder of The Closet Jacks, a local nonprofit speakeasy for LGBT youth. And Veronica Wilson comes to us from Outjacks Radio. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about some of the shows you may have coming up, Veronica?
Oh, Lord. We got the shows that we normally do. We have a couple shows during the week, but we are now down to, I think, 2. So we do 2 live shows. We do what's called Friday Night Live. It's 8 to 11 every Friday nights on outjacks.com. That's OUTJAX.com, 8 to 11. It's got music. It's got three girls that absolutely giggle it up, and honestly, I was worried, but it's really fun. And then we also have Morning Sushi. Morning Sushi comes to you live every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Morning Sushi is raw, unapologetic, and not filtered at all. So we take on the news like it is, like we think it is. And we always have guests. So maybe, Shafalika, you'll be a guest one day.
Perhaps. We'll see. I would love the opportunity to come by and talk to you guys. I have a lot of these issues that I cover are very close and near to my heart. So thank you both very much for your time. And for Spinnaker Media, this is Shafalika Bhatnagar, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.